So let's talk about my qualms with dating apps, why I think they can be problematic, and why I think so many of the times they end in failure. Hi, my name is Stella. I'm a trauma, attachment, and couples therapist, and I also happen to meet my man on Hinge. And I know for most people, if they met their partners on Hinge or any sort of dating app, they try to play devil's advocate. They try to tell people, like, just wait your turn. It's a numbers game. You'll find your person. It's not the worst because I met my man on Hinge. And let me tell you why that's a little bit invalidating, and it's also not that simple. Even though I met my partner on a dating app, it does not mean that suddenly my perspective on dating apps have changed entirely and that I love them now. Does this mean that I tell my clients to not use the apps? No. Does this mean that I tell my friends to not use the apps? No. It just means that there are certain features about the apps and certain people and how the app is used or how it's encouraging users to use it that make it so problematic. This is all based off of personal opinion. Everyone is entitled to their opinion. You are not entitled to follow this advice or agree with me by any means. So let's start with the most important aspect of the apps that I feel like are extremely problematic, and that is safety, in particular for women using the apps or people that identify with being a woman. I'm sure you've all heard the multitude of horror stories from these apps, many of which I've also experienced myself, that I've put women's lives at risk, that I've put their safety in jeopardy, and have caused women to develop this distrust in going on the apps again. And I'm not just talking about the simple bad dates. My advice to you ladies is if you go on these apps, do not ever go to a man's house or let him come to your home, even if you have roommates. Because once you let a stranger into your home, once he knows where you live, even if you have roommates, that immediately puts your safety at risk in the future. Always meet in a public setting. Always share your location with your friends. Never have him call you an Uber home so that he knows where you live. Do not give in to the pressure or the guilt or anything for that matter. Because ultimately, the person that you're going on a date with is a complete stranger. He has not been vetted by anyone in your life. You have no idea what his history is. You could be going on a date with a sexual predator or a Jeffrey Dahmer, and that's the last thing that you want. So even if he's charming, even if this is the best connection you've ever had in your life, do not go to his home and do not let him come to yours. And I have been guilty of this plenty of times. And just because I and many other women have happened to be lucky does not mean that you will. A lot of these men can choose how they want to be perceived, and they can choose how they want to show themselves on these apps. They can put anything. There are no guardrails or restrictions from the creators of these apps to make sure that what they're putting on their profile is accurate by any means. It could all be a facade in order for them to gain control of you and to lure you in. Do your research. Have your friends be involved. Properly vet this man before it goes any further. With that being said, let me get into why I think so many of these apps can be problematic and why people are not finding their person on these apps. Besides the fact that these apps have no proper vetting system and that anyone with a pulse can make a profile and display themselves in any way that they want, how the apps are being used by both men and women are also problematic. So let's just make the assumption that both the men and the women on these apps are non-violent, non-toxic, and very average, normal people. Obviously, that's not the case, but let's just pretend for this example. Let's just assume that these people on these apps are looking for real, long-lasting relationships. The reason why these apps are not conducive to forming these deep, long-lasting relationships is because we as a society, up until dating apps became a thing, we're not given the luxury of choice. We are not supposed to have this many options. I will say that again. We are not supposed to have this many options. These apps perpetuate this idea of the grass being greener on the other side. Your curiosity of what the next person could be like gets the best of you. You could have a great, solid connection with someone that you matched with, great conversation. You may have even gotten on a few good dates. But then you get lured back in thinking, what if the next person I match with is even better, is hotter, more successful, easier to talk to? And you go down the rabbit hole of the constant swiping, constantly chasing, constantly looking for something better. And what happens is the goalpost is always moving. As opposed to strengthening and nurturing the already existing relationship that you already found, that honestly doesn't have any red flags, you're also chasing for something better, thinking there could be something better. And with many of these apps, there's no limits. Yes, you might have limited swipes per day or something like that, but there is always access to more. And it's because of what it does to your brain. Our brain is constantly chasing dopamine. And these apps, and again, the creators of these apps know this, are designed in a way that causes your brain to consistently chase that dopamine. Again, the swipes, the constant swiping, the constant matching. It's almost having the same effect on your brain as swiping through TikTok videos continuously. It's hard to stop. In many cases, you do it impulsively. You're not actually doing it with intention. And so many people, especially women, fall into this trap of having way too many matches. And instead of trying to nurture those matches, they want to keep swiping for more, like a game. Because again, the dopamine. Men fall into this trap too. Don't get me wrong, ladies. And this is not to say that you haven't tried to really engage in conversation with your existing matches and that they have gotten nowhere. I'm sure that happens plenty of times. But both men and women, the reason why you're not getting the responses, the reason why maybe the conversation fell short and you're not getting a response as quickly as possible is because the person on the other side fell into that dopamine trap of wanting to continue to swipe instead of nurturing the existing connection. So now you're stuck with an archive or an entire roster, if you will, of messages from people that you didn't have the capacity to continue talking to. Why? Because even though acquiring these messages and these matches give you that dopamine hit, now you're stuck with the complete overwhelm of having way too many messages you have to respond to. And the brain power that it takes to engage in all of these conversations is way too much that you just freeze. And so now it's just that much easier to continue swiping because the other option is to go through the other 50 messages of people you didn't really engage with and have to put in the work to talk to. Again, both men and women do this. So let's just say you matched with someone you really liked, and then you matched with another person that was appealing to you, and then another person, and now you have 3 messages, and that 3 easily turns to 5, which easily turns to 8, which easily turns to 10. Now you're overwhelmed because you don't have the capacity to respond to all those 10 people or to engage in conversation to all of those 10 people, and so you continue swiping. And so who knows, maybe 3 or 4 out of those 10 people were excited for a response back to you and probably really confused because you guys had a pretty decent conversation. And so now they feel depleted and they feel hopeless. So they go right back to that dopamine trap of swiping even more. And then now they're accruing all of these more messages, and they feel overwhelmed. So they shut down and they don't respond to the people that they matched with. And the cycle continues. Again, it's this illusion of choice and the overwhelm and the constant need for that dopamine hit that get us stuck in these patterns of not really engaging in real conversation with the people we did match with. Again, if the conversations are bland and dry or if they're blaring red flags, totally understandable, but that's not always the case. And 9 times out of 10, if you don't get a response back, it's not because you're not good enough. It's because the person on the other end fell into this trap, into this cycle.